The gunshot echoed across the desert plain like a death knell, sending a flock of startled ravens into the crimson sky. Abigail O'Malley pressed herself against the weathered wall of her father's mercantile, the familiar scent of cedar and tobacco suddenly overwhelmed by the metallic tang of blood. She'd lived all 22 years of her life in Copper Canyon, Arizona, but never had the violence of 1878 come so close to her doorstep, until now. The man who stumbled into the alley beside her store was a stranger, his dark silhouette cutting against the dying light. Blood soaked through his shirt, spreading across his abdomen in an alarming pattern. His hat, a fine Stetson that had seen better days, tumbled to the dirt as he slumped against the water trough. "Sir?" Abigail called, her voice barely audible over the commotion from the saloon down the street. "Sir, are you hurt?" It was a foolish question. Of course he was hurt. She gathered her skirts and moved toward him, caution battling with compassion. The town doctor had ridden out to the Harrison place that morning and wouldn't be back until tomorrow at the earliest. The man's head snapped up at her approach, and Abigail found herself staring down the barrel of a Colt revolver. His eyes, the blue of a winter sky, were fever-bright with pain. "Stay back," he warned, his voice a ragged whisper. "This ain't your trouble, miss." "You're bleeding in my alley," Abigail replied, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'd say that makes it my trouble." A chorus of angry voices rose from Main Street. The man glanced over his shoulder, his jaw tightening. "They're coming." "Who's coming?" "Men who want me dead." He tried to rise, but his legs buckled beneath him. The revolver fell from his grasp, landing with a dull thud in the dirt. Abigail hesitated for only a moment before making a decision that would change her life forever. She scooped up the gun, tucked it into her apron pocket, and reached for the stranger. "I can help you," she said, offering her arm. "There's a back entrance to our storeroom." The man regarded her with suspicion, but desperation won out. "You'll regret helping me." Abigail met his gaze unflinchingly. "Then I'll live with it." With strength she didn't know she possessed, Abigail half-dragged the wounded stranger through the back door of O'Malley's Mercantile and General Goods. The storeroom was dark and cool, filled with wooden crates and burlap sacks. She lowered him onto a makeshift bed of feed sacks, then hurried to bolt the door. "I need to tend that wound," she said, lighting a lantern. In its glow, she got her first good look at him. Despite the pallor of blood loss, he was handsome in a rough-hewn way, all angles and shadows beneath several days' worth of beard. His clothes were trail-worn but of good quality. A cowboy, but not an ordinary one. "Name's Nathan," he managed, grimacing as he shifted. "Nathan Jacobs." "Abigail O'Malley." She gathered clean rags and a basin of water. "Where are you from, Mr. Jacobs?" "Nowhere worth mentioning," he replied, "and it's just Nathan." The bullet had torn through his side, a blessing, as it had passed clean through without lodging in his flesh. Abigail worked efficiently, cleaning the wound with whiskey from her father's private stock, ignoring Nathan's colorful curses as the alcohol seared his torn flesh. "Your bedside manner needs work," he hissed through clenched teeth. "And your manners in general could use some attention," she retorted, pressing a clean bandage to his side. "Most men say thank you when a lady saves their life." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The day isn't over yet, Miss O'Malley. Those men outside might still get their chance to kill me and anyone helping me." "Why are they after you?" Nathan's expression darkened. "I've made some powerful enemies." "Doing what exactly?" Before he could answer, the front door of the store banged open. Abigail froze, her hand instinctively moving to the revolver in her pocket. "Abigail," her father's voice. "Are you here, girl?" "Just a moment, Pa," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "Not a sound, understand?" Nathan nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. Abigail hurried into the store, smoothing her apron and praying the blood hadn't stained her dress. Her father, Thomas O'Malley, stood at the counter, his weathered face creased with concern. "There's been trouble in town," he said. "Marshall's forming a posse. Says an outlaw's been spotted, one of the Jensen gang." Abigail's stomach clenched. The Jensen gang had been terrorizing the Arizona territory for months, robbing banks, holding up stage coaches, leaving a trail of bodies in their wake. "How dreadful," she managed. "But surely they won't come here. Marshall thinks he might be wounded." Thomas's keen eyes scanned his daughter's face. "You're pale, Abby. You feeling all right?" "Just tired, Pa. It's been a long day." Thomas nodded, seeming to accept this. "I'm heading over to help with the search. Lock the doors behind me and don't open them for anyone but me or the marshal, you hear?" "Yes, Pa." After he left, Abigail sagged against the counter, her mind racing. She'd just hidden a wounded outlaw in her father's storeroom, a member of the notorious Jensen gang. She should march back there and demand he leave, or better yet, call for the marshal. Instead, she found herself returning to the storeroom, determination hardening her resolve. Nathan was exactly where she'd left him, though he'd managed to sit up against a crate of canned goods. "You're with the Jensen gang," she said. It wasn't a question. Nathan's eyes narrowed. "And if I am, then you're a thief and a murderer." "I've never killed anyone who wasn't trying to kill me first," he replied, his voice low. "As for thieving, yes, I've done my share." Abigail crossed her arms. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't turn you in right now." "Because despite what you've heard, the Jensen gang isn't what you think." Nathan winced as he shifted position. "Well, Jensen's my friend, been like a brother to me since we were boys. But he's not the one giving the orders anymore." "What do you mean?" "His cousin Roland took over 6 months ago. Will's been trying to break away, get out of the life. Roland didn't take kindly to that." Nathan's expression darkened. "He's holding Will's sister, he hesitated. My fiancée. Or she was before all this." Abigail felt a strange twist in her chest. "Your fiancée, Caroline. She was supposed to meet me in Tucson last month, but she never showed. Then I got word that Roland was keeping her at their hideout, using her to ensure Will's cooperation." Nathan's fist clenched. "I've been trying to find a way to get her out. So the men looking for you are Roland's. I got too close to their operation in Silver Creek. They've been hunting me ever since." Abigail studied him, trying to separate truth from fiction. The pain in his eyes seemed genuine, but she'd heard outlaws were practiced liars. "If what you're saying is true, why not go to the law?" Nathan laughed bitterly. "Roland's got half the lawmen in the territory in his pocket. The ones he doesn't own, he intimidates. And the few honest ones left wouldn't believe a word from someone riding with the Jensens." Abigail considered this. Corruption wasn't unheard of, even in their small corner of the territory. The previous marshal had left town suddenly after a large sum went missing from the bank. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Nathan reached slowly into his vest pocket and withdrew a small, tarnished locket. He handed it to Abigail, who opened it to find a miniature portrait of a pretty young woman with golden hair. "Caroline," he said softly. "Will gave me that before I left to find her, said to bring it back with his sister or not at all." Something in his voice, the raw emotion, convinced Abigail more than his words had. She closed the locket and returned it to him. "You need rest," she said finally. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do." Nathan caught her wrist as she turned to leave. His touch was gentle despite his rough appearance. "Thank you," he said, his eyes holding hers. "I know what this costs you." Abigail pulled away, unsettled by the warmth his touch had sparked. "Don't thank me yet, Mr. Jacobs. I haven't decided if I'm helping you or turning you in." She left him then, securing the storeroom before retreating to her room above the store. Sleep eluded her as she replayed Nathan's story in her mind. If he was lying, she was harboring a dangerous criminal. If he was telling the truth, a woman's life hung in the balance. Either way, Abigail had stepped into something far bigger than her quiet life in Copper Canyon. Morning came with the sound of horses and men's voices in the street below. Abigail dressed quickly and hurried downstairs to find her father already at the counter, serving a group of tired-looking men. "Any sign of him, Marshal?" Thomas asked, pouring coffee into tin cups. Marshal Davis, a barrel-chested man with a walrus mustache, shook his head. "Trail went cold at the creek. We're expanding the search today." "He's likely halfway to Mexico by now," said another man, Everett Porter, the banker's son. "Not with a bullet in him, he ain't," replied the marshal. "We found blood leading out of town. He's hurt bad." Abigail busied herself arranging goods on a shelf, keeping her back to the men, conscious of the secret just behind the storeroom door. "Abby," her father called. "Fetch some of those jerky strips for the men, would you?" She nodded, heading to the storeroom with her heart in her throat. Nathan was awake, his revolver now back in his hand, pointed steadily at the door as she entered. He lowered it when he saw her. "There are men outside," she whispered. "The marshal and his posse." "I heard," Nathan replied. His color was better this morning, though pain still etched lines around his mouth. "How long will they stay?" "I don't know. They're resuming the search soon." She grabbed a bundle of jerky from a shelf, then hesitated. "I need to know, was anything you told me last night true? All of it?" Nathan's gaze was unwavering. "I know you have no reason to trust me, Miss O'Malley, but I swear on my life I'm trying to save Caroline, and will too if I can." Abigail searched his face for any sign of deception. Finding none, she made a decision that surprised even herself. "They'll be watching the roads. You'll need to stay here until nightfall at least." She handed him a canteen of fresh water and a packet of jerky. "I'll try to find out where they're searching." Nathan's expression softened with gratitude. "Why are you doing this?" Abigail paused at the door. "Because everyone deserves a chance to do the right thing, even outlaws." The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. The posse remained in town, combing nearby farms and ranches. Abigail went about her duties in the store, smiling and chatting as if nothing was amiss, all the while listening for any information that might help Nathan. By mid-afternoon, she had learned that Roland Jensen and his men had been spotted near Devil's Gorge, some 30 miles to the west. According to the gossip, they had a camp hidden somewhere in that labyrinth of canyons, possibly where Caroline was being held. When Abigail managed to slip back into the storeroom with this information, Nathan was on his feet, testing his injured side. "You should be resting," she admonished, setting down a plate of food. "Been resting all day," he replied. "Need to know if I can ride." "And can you?" he grimaced. "I'll manage," Abigail frowned. "That wound could reopen. You've lost too much blood already." "Don't have a choice, Miss O'Malley. If Roland's at Devil's Gorge, that's where I need to be." "And what exactly is your plan? Ride in alone against a gang of killers?" Nathan's silence told her he had no real plan beyond reaching the gorge. "That's what I thought," she said. "You need help." "I won't involve anyone else in this," Nathan said firmly. "You already have." Abigail met his gaze steadily. "I know these canyons better than most. My mother was Navajo. She taught me the hidden trails before she died." Nathan stared at her, surprise evident in his expression. "You're offering to guide me. I'm offering to help you rescue Caroline. After that, our paths part ways." "It's too dangerous," he protested. "If Roland's men caught you, they won't." Abigail's chin lifted stubbornly. "Besides, a man and woman traveling together draw less attention than a lone rider, especially one being hunted." Nathan studied her for a long moment. "Your father would never allow it." "My father doesn't need to know. He's leaving for Tucson tomorrow, a supply run that will take at least a week." Abigail had already worked through this detail. "I often close the store and visit my mother's people when he's away. No one would question my absence." "Why would you risk so much for strangers?" Nathan asked quietly. Abigail thought of her mother, who died helping others during a fever outbreak 5 years earlier. "Because it's what my mother would have done." That night, after her father had gone to bed, Abigail packed supplies and clothing into saddlebags. She wrote a note explaining she was visiting her cousins in the Navajo settlement to the north, a place her father seldom visited due to the lingering prejudice he faced there as a white man. Nathan watched her preparations with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're very calm for someone planning to ride into an outlaw stronghold." "I'm terrified," she admitted, her hands stilling on the leather straps of a bag. "But fear never accomplished anything worthwhile. You're quite something, Abigail O'Malley." There was a warmth in his voice that made her look up. The intensity of his gaze sent a flutter through her stomach. "I'm just doing what's right," she replied, turning away to hide the flush creeping up her neck. They set out before dawn, slipping through the quiet streets of Copper Canyon like ghosts. Abigail rode her dappled mare, while Nathan sat astride a sturdy bay gelding borrowed without permission from the livery stable. She'd left payment and a note, but it still felt like theft. The desert was cool in the pre-dawn hours, the air sweet with the scent of sage and creosote. Abigail led them along rarely used trails, keeping to the shadows of the mesas and away from the main roads where the marshal's men might patrol. How far to Devil's Gorge? Nathan asked as the sun climbed higher. 2 days if we push hard, Abigail replied, but we need to be careful with your wound. Better to take it slow and arrive able to fight. Nathan nodded, though impatience was written in the set of his shoulders. Tell me about these hidden trails. As they rode, Abigail shared the knowledge her mother had passed down, stories of ancient pathways used by her people long before white settlers arrived. Nathan listened intently, asking questions that revealed a genuine interest beyond their immediate needs. Your mother must have been an extraordinary woman, he said during a brief rest to water the horses. She was, Abigail agreed, a familiar ache spreading through her chest. She married my father against both families' wishes. They faced so much hatred, but they never regretted their choice. Nathan's expression grew thoughtful. Love that defies expectations, that's rare. What about you and Caroline? Abigail asked, curiosity getting the better of her. How did you meet? A shadow crossed Nathan's face. We grew up together in Texas. Her brother Will and I were inseparable, and Caroline was always tagging along. When we got older, things changed between us. He stared into the distance. We were going to leave the territory, start fresh somewhere no one knew the Jensen name. What happened, Roland, happened. After Will and Caroline's parents died, he showed up claiming to be their father's brother. Turned out he was a distant cousin with an eye for easy money. Nathan's jaw tightened. He saw Will's skill with horses and guns, my knowledge of the land, said we could make a fortune if we worked together. And you agreed. We were young, angry at the world. It started small, rustling cattle from wealthy ranchers who wouldn't miss a few head. Then it escalated. Nathan looked down at his hands. By the time we realized how deep we were, Roland had amassed a gang of cutthroats. When Will wanted out, Roland took Caroline to ensure his cooperation. Abigail absorbed this, and you've been trying to free them both ever since. Nathan nodded. Will's been playing along, feeding me information when he can. Last I heard, Roland was planning something big enough to retire on. After that, he wouldn't need Will or Caroline anymore. The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Abigail mounted her horse with renewed determination. Then we'd better hurry. They made camp that night in a sheltered canyon, the remains of their small fire casting dancing shadows on the rock walls. Abigail changed Nathan's bandages, pleased to find the wound healing cleanly with no signs of infection. You have a gentle touch, Nathan murmured as she tied off a fresh strip of cloth. My mother taught me healing as well as tracking, Abigail replied, acutely aware of his nearness, the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. She withdrew quickly, busying herself with their meager dinner preparations. Later, as they sat side by side beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Nathan spoke softly. I keep thinking about what you said back in Copper Canyon about everyone deserving a chance to do the right thing. Do you believe that's true? Abigail asked. I want to. His profile was limned in silver by the moonlight. But I've done things, Abigail, things I can't take back. Yet here you are, risking your life to save Caroline and her brother. Trying to undo some of the damage I've caused, he corrected. That's not the same as being a good man. Abigail turned to face him fully. I think a truly bad man wouldn't care enough to make the distinction. Their eyes held for a moment too long. Nathan looked away first, clearing his throat. You should get some sleep. I'll take first watch. Abigail nodded, retreating to her bedroll, but sleep was elusive. She found herself watching Nathan's silhouette against the star-filled sky, wondering how a man with such honor had fallen in with outlaws and trying to ignore the growing warmth she felt in his presence. The next day brought them deeper into the maze of canyons leading to Devil's Gorge. The terrain grew increasingly rugged, forcing them to dismount and lead their horses through narrow passages. By midday, the heat had become oppressive, the sun beating down mercilessly from a cloudless sky. There's a spring ahead, Abigail said, wiping sweat from her brow. We can rest there and plan our approach. The spring was a small oasis nestled between towering red rock walls, a pool of crystal-clear water surrounded by cottonwood trees. They watered the horses and refilled their canteens, grateful for the cool shade. Devil's Gorge is just beyond that ridge, Abigail said, pointing to a distant formation. If Roland's camp is there, we need to find it without being seen. Nathan nodded, his expression grim. I know a way in an old mining tunnel that connects to a box canyon where they sometimes keep their horses. Will showed it to me once. Can you find it again? I think so. He hesitated. Abigail, when we get there, I want you to stay back. Guide me to the entrance, then wait with the horses. She shook her head firmly. That wasn't our agreement. I'm coming with you. It's too dangerous, Nathan insisted. These men, they're not just thieves. They're killers who enjoy their work. All the more reason you need someone watching your back, Abigail replied. Besides, two can move Caroline more easily than one, especially if she's hurt. Nathan looked like he wanted to argue further, but the determination in Abigail's eyes stopped him. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. So my father tells me, she replied with a small smile. Now tell me everything you know about this camp. They spent the afternoon devising a plan, using sticks to draw a rough map in the dirt. Nathan described what he knew of Roland's habits, the number of men likely to be present, and the possible locations where Caroline might be held. Roland always keeps a guard on her, he explained. Usually just one man. He doesn't expect anyone to find this place. Arrogance is our ally then, Abigail noted. What about Will? Will he help us? If he can, yes, but Roland keeps him close, doesn't trust him fully. As the sun began its descent, they gathered their belongings and prepared to move out. Nathan checked his revolver and the rifle he carried in his saddle holster. Abigail revealed a small derringer tucked into her boot. My father insisted I learn to use it after Mother died, she explained, seeing Nathan's surprised expression. Said a woman alone needs protection. He's a wise man, Nathan replied. Let's hope you won't need it. They approached Devil's Gorge as dusk settled over the land, transforming the red rock into deep burgundy shadows. Leaving their horses concealed in a stand of junipers, they continued on foot, moving silently through the gathering darkness. The entrance to the mining tunnel was hidden behind a fallen boulder, barely visible in the failing light. Nathan moved the stone just enough to create an opening, revealing a black mouth in the rock face. Stay close, he whispered, drawing his revolver. The tunnel runs for about a quarter mile before it opens into the canyon. Abigail nodded, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain Nathan must hear it. They entered the tunnel, the darkness swallowing them whole. Nathan struck a match, lighting a small lantern they'd brought for this purpose, though he kept the flame turned low. The air was stale and heavy with mineral scents, the tunnel walls rough-hewn and supported in places by ancient timbers that groaned ominously. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness ahead, the sound echoing eerily. The miners abandoned this place 30 years ago, Nathan explained softly. Found more silver up north and left everything behind. They moved carefully, mindful of loose rocks and rotted support beams. Abigail fought against the fear of the enclosed space, focusing instead on the task ahead, finding Caroline and escaping without alerting Roland's men. After what seemed like hours but was likely less than 30 minutes, the tunnel began to slope upward. A faint glow of light appeared ahead, moonlight filtering in from the exit. Nathan extinguished their lantern. From here we go silent, he breathed against her ear. They crept toward the exit, the sound of voices growing clearer as they approached. Peering out, Abigail could see the box canyon Nathan had described. A campfire burned at its center, surrounded by several men. Horses were corralled to one side, and a cluster of canvas tents stood against the far wall. Nathan scanned the scene, his body tense beside her. 4 men at the fire, he whispered. 2 more on guard at the canyon entrance. Where would they keep Caroline? He nodded toward a tent set slightly apart from the others. There, see the man sitting outside. Abigail spotted him, a burly figure with a shotgun across his knees. What about Will? Do you see him? Nathan's eyes continued their search. No, he might be with Roland. He pointed to the largest tent. That would be Roland's. If Will's here, that's where he'd be. So what's our next move? Wait until they bed down. The night guard usually dozes by midnight. Then we'll make our move on Caroline's tent. They settled in to wait, watching as the camp gradually quieted. Men retired to their tents one by one, until only the guard outside Caroline's tent and another patrolling the perimeter remained. As Nathan had predicted, the guard's head began to nod as midnight approached. The patrol passed by their position once, then disappeared around the other side of the canyon, giving them a narrow window of opportunity. "Now," Nathan whispered, easing out of their hiding place. They moved swiftly across the open ground, keeping to the deepest shadows. Abigail's heart threatened to burst from her chest, but her feet remained steady, following Nathan's lead as they approached the tent. The guard's chin rested on his chest, his breathing deep and even. Nathan motioned for Abigail to stay put, then crept forward, a rock clutched in his hand. With practiced precision, he brought it down on the guard's head, not hard enough to kill, but sufficient to ensure he stayed unconscious. Abigail hurried forward as Nathan eased the man to the ground. She kept watch while Nathan cut through the tent's rear wall with his knife, creating an opening just large enough to slip through. Inside, a young woman lay on a cot, her wrists bound to the frame. Even in the dim light, Abigail could see the resemblance to the portrait in Nathan's locket, Caroline Jensen, though her face was thinner, her golden hair tangled and dull. Caroline's eyes flew open at their entrance, widening with fear until she recognized Nathan. He rushed to her side, cutting the ropes that bound her. "Nathan," she breathed, her voice cracking with emotion. "You came." "Of course I came," he replied, helping her sit up. "Can you walk?" Caroline nodded, though she swayed slightly as she stood. We'll find him," Nathan promised. "But first, we need to get you out of here." Abigail moved to support Caroline's other side. "I'm Abigail, we need to hurry." They made their way back to the cut in the tent, but just as they were about to slip out, voices approached the patrol returning. "Back," Nathan hissed, pulling them away from the opening. They crouched in the shadows as footsteps circled the tent. A curse rang out as the unconscious guard was discovered. "Search the tents," a harsh voice commanded. "The girl's gone." Chaos erupted in the camp, men shouting, lanterns flaring to life, the sound of boots on rocky ground. "We need another way out," Abigail whispered urgently. Nathan's eyes darted around the tent, seeking options where none existed. "We fight our way through," he said grimly, checking his revolver. Before Abigail could respond, the tent flap was thrown open. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the sudden light, a man with a shock of gray-streaked hair and a scar bisecting his left cheek. Well, he drawled, a rifle held casually in his hands. "Look what the cat dragged in." "Roland," Nathan acknowledged, his voice steady despite the dire circumstances. More men appeared behind Roland, weapons drawn. Abigail counted at least 5, their faces hard in the lantern light. "Nathan Jacobs," Roland continued, stepping into the tent. "I've been expecting you. Though I must say I didn't anticipate you'd bring such charming company." His gaze shifted to Abigail, a predatory smile spreading across his face. "Leave her out of this," Nathan warned, shifting to place himself between Roland and the women. "I'm afraid that's not possible now." Roland gestured with his rifle. "Outside, all of you. I don't like having serious conversations in such cramped quarters." With guns trained on them from all sides, they had no choice but to comply. Abigail supported Caroline, who trembled with exhaustion and fear as they were marched into the center of the camp. The fire had been built up, casting a harsh light over the assembled outlaws. Abigail searched their faces, wondering which might be Will Jensen, but none seemed to match Nathan's descriptions. "Where's Will?" Nathan demanded, echoing her thoughts. Roland smiled coldly. "My dear cousin is on an errand, banking business in Prescott. He'll be so disappointed to have missed your rescue attempt." "Where is he really?" Caroline asked, speaking for the first time since their capture. "What have you done to my brother?" "Nothing yet," Roland replied, "but his continued good health depends entirely on your cooperation, my dear." "Something you've been sadly lacking lately." Nathan tensed beside Abigail. "What are you planning, Roland? What's this big score Will mentioned?" Roland's eyebrows rose in surprise. "So he did manage to get word to you. I suspected as much." He paced before them, his boots kicking up dust in the firelight. "It's quite simple, really. The Territorial Treasury is moving a shipment of gold to Tucson next week, payment for the new railroad contracts, nearly $500,000. Abigail gasped despite herself. It was an unimaginable sum. "Will is laying the groundwork in Prescott," Roland continued. When the shipment leaves, we'll be waiting. One last job and then the Jensen gang disappears forever. And a lot of innocent people die, Nathan said flatly. Roland shrugged. Casualties of progress, my boy, nothing personal. It's always personal to those who die, Abigail spoke up, unable to contain her anger. Roland turned his attention to her, studying her with newfound interest. And who might you be, my fierce little rescuer? Leave her alone, Roland, Nathan growled. Protective, are we? Roland smirked. How touching, and here I thought you were still pining for our dear Caroline. An uncomfortable silence fell. Abigail felt Caroline stiffen beside her. Enough talk, Nathan said. What happens now? Roland sighed theatrically. Now, sadly, I have to decide what to do with you. I need Caroline alive to ensure Will's cooperation. You, on the other hand, he leveled his rifle at Nathan's chest. You've become a liability I can no longer afford. No, Caroline cried, lunging forward only to be restrained by one of Roland's men. Abigail's mind raced, searching desperately for a way out of their predicament. Her hand crept toward her boot where her derringer remained hidden. A shout from the canyon entrance interrupted the standoff. Riders coming in, Roland frowned, momentarily distracted. We're not expecting anyone. The distraction was all Abigail needed. In one fluid motion, she drew her derringer and aimed it at Roland's head. Drop the rifle, she commanded, her voice steadier than she felt. Roland froze, then laughed. My, full of surprises, aren't you? I said drop it. The approaching riders grew louder, hooves thundering against the canyon floor. Roland's men looked uncertainly between their leader and the newcomers. Boss, one of them called. What do we do? Roland never took his eyes off Abigail. That little popgun only has one shot, darling. Even if you manage to kill me, my men will cut you down before you can blink. Then I'll make it count, Abigail replied, cocking the hammer. The standoff might have ended in bloodshed if not for the sudden appearance of the riders, a dozen men on lathered horses, led by a figure Abigail recognized instantly. Pa, she gasped, her aim wavering. Thomas O'Malley sat astride his buckskin gelding, a Winchester rifle in his hands. Beside him rode Marshal Davis and several men from Copper Canyon, all armed and grim-faced. Abigail Mary O'Malley, her father thundered. What in God's name are you doing? Roland recovered quickly, lowering his rifle and assuming a posture of innocent confusion. Thank heaven you've arrived, Marshal. These people were trying to rob us. Save it, Jensen, the Marshal replied. We know exactly who you are. Hands up, all of you. Outnumbered and outgunned, Roland's men reluctantly raised their hands. Roland himself seemed frozen in disbelief. This is impossible, he sputtered. How did you find us? You can thank Will Jensen for that, Marshal Davis said, dismounting. Turned himself in at Prescott yesterday, told us everything, your hideout, your plans for the Treasury shipment, all of it. Will's alive. Caroline whispered, hope blooming on her face. Alive and cooperating fully, the Marshal confirmed. Said he couldn't live with what his cousin was planning. As Roland and his men were disarmed and bound, Abigail found herself facing her father's thunderous expression. I can explain, she began weakly. You most certainly will, Thomas replied, though his anger seemed tempered with relief as he pulled her into a brief, fierce embrace. What were you thinking, girl? Running off with an outlaw, former outlaw, Nathan corrected, stepping forward. Sir, your daughter saved my life, and Caroline's too. If anyone's to blame here, it's me. Thomas looked Nathan up and down, his expression unreadable. We'll sort this out later. Right now, let's get out of this God-forsaken place. The ride back to Copper Canyon took 2 days. Caroline rode with the Marshal, while Nathan remained under guard, his status uncertain despite Will's testimony clearing him of involvement in the gang's more violent activities. Abigail rode beside her father, enduring his mixture of lectures and worried questions. She explained everything, finding Nathan wounded, his story about Caroline, their plan to rescue her. You could have been killed, Thomas said for perhaps the 20th time as they made camp the first night. I know, Pa, Abigail replied, but it was the right thing to do. Thomas sighed heavily. Your mother would say the same thing. She'd also be proud of you, though I'll never admit to saying that. Abigail smiled, glancing across the camp where Nathan sat, separated from the others but watching her with an intensity that made her heart flutter. "That young man," Thomas observed, following her gaze. "He seems to care for you. We barely know each other," Abigail protested, though the words rang hollow even to her own ears. "Some things don't need time," her father replied enigmatically. Upon reaching Copper Canyon, Roland and his men were locked in the town jail to await transport to the territorial prison. Caroline was reunited with Will, who had been brought from Prescott under protective custody. Their tearful embrace brought a lump to Abigail's throat. Nathan's fate remained undecided. Though Will's testimony had confirmed his efforts to free Caroline and his minimal involvement in the gang's activities, he had still ridden with outlaws. 3 days after their return, Abigail found herself standing before Marshal Davis's desk, arguing Nathan's case. "He risked his life to save Caroline," she insisted. "Without him, we never would have found her." "Be that as it may, Miss O'Malley, the law is the law," the marshal replied, though his expression was sympathetic. "Mr. Jacobs has admitted to participating in cattle rustling and at least 2 bank robberies. But no killings," Abigail pressed, "and he's been trying to make amends." "That will certainly be taken into consideration." The marshal shuffled some papers on his desk. "The judge arrives next week. Until then, Mr. Jacobs remains in custody." Defeated for the moment, Abigail left the marshal's office. She found Caroline waiting outside, her appearance much improved after several days of proper food and rest. "Any luck?" Caroline asked, falling into step beside her. Abigail shook her head. "The marshal says it's up to the judge." They walked in silence for a moment, an unspoken tension between them that had been building since their return. "He loves you, you know," Caroline said suddenly. Abigail stopped, startled. "What? Nathan? He looks at you the way he used to look at me, only more so." Caroline's smile was tinged with sadness. "We were children playing at love, Nathan and I. What you two have, that's the real thing." "Caroline, it's all right," she interrupted gently. "Will and I are leaving for California as soon as the judge allows it. Our real uncle, has a ranch near Sacramento. We're going to start fresh." "What about Nathan?" Caroline squeezed Abigail's hand. "That depends on you, I think." The judge arrived the following Wednesday, a stern-faced man named Hollister with a reputation for fairness despite his rigid adherence to the law. The town buzzed with speculation about the fate of Will Jensen and Nathan Jacobs. The hearing was held in the town hall, packed with curious citizens. Abigail sat with her father in the front row, her stomach knotting with anxiety as Nathan was led in, his hands unbound but a deputy at his side. Judge Hollister heard testimony from Marshal Davis, Will Jensen, and several witnesses to the gang's activities. Nathan spoke briefly, admitting his wrongdoing but emphasizing his efforts to rescue Caroline and stop Roland's final plan. When asked if anyone else wished to speak on the defendant's behalf, Abigail rose before she could second-guess herself. "Miss." Judge Hollister peered at her over his spectacles. "Abigail O'Malley, Your Honor," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "I'd like to speak for Mr. Jacobs." The judge nodded, and Abigail moved to stand before him. She felt Nathan's eyes on her but didn't dare look his way, afraid her courage might falter. "Your Honor, I know Nathan Jacobs has broken the law. He's admitted as much. But I've seen the kind of man he truly is, one who would risk everything to save a woman in danger, one who tried to stop a terrible crime before it could occur." She spoke of Nathan's actions during their journey to Devil's Gorge, his protection of both her and Caroline, his willingness to sacrifice himself when they were captured. "The law says he must be punished," she concluded. "But justice, true justice, should recognize when a man has changed, when he's fighting to be better than his past." A murmur ran through the crowd as she returned to her seat. Her father squeezed her hand, pride evident in his weathered face. After deliberating for nearly an hour, Judge Hollister delivered his verdict. Will Jensen, having turned state's evidence and never having participated directly in violence, was sentenced to 2 years probation, conditional on his immediate departure from the territory. Then came Nathan's turn. The judge regarded him thoughtfully. "Nathan Jacobs, the crimes you've admitted to typically carry a sentence of 5 to 10 years of hard labor," he began. The knot in Abigail's stomach tightened painfully. However, the judge continued, considering the testimony regarding your efforts to rescue Miss Jensen, your attempt to prevent the Treasury robbery, and the character reference so eloquently provided by Miss O'Malley, I am inclined toward leniency. Abigail hardly dared breathe. 3 years probation, Judge Hollister announced, during which time you will remain within the boundaries of Copper Canyon and report weekly to Marshal Davis. You will make restitution for your crimes through community service, the nature of which the marshal will determine. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate imprisonment. Do you understand and accept these conditions? I do, Your Honor, Nathan replied, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you. As the crowd dispersed, Abigail found herself surrounded by well-wishers and curious neighbors, all eager to hear more details about her adventure. By the time she extracted herself, Nathan had been led away to complete the necessary paperwork for his release. She waited outside the marshal's office, pacing nervously until the door finally opened and Nathan emerged, looking somewhat dazed by his unexpected freedom. He stopped when he saw her, a smile slowly spreading across his face. Abigail O'Malley, he said, it seems I'm forever in your debt. I'll add it to your tab, she replied, her attempt at lightness undermined by the tremor in her voice. They stood facing each other, the late afternoon sun painting the street gold around them, 1,000 unspoken words hanging in the air between them. What will you do now? Abigail asked finally. Honestly, I haven't thought beyond hoping I wouldn't be sent to prison. Nathan took a step closer. But I know what I want. And what's that? A chance, he said simply. A chance to be the man you believe I can be, a chance to know you better if you'll allow it. Abigail's heart raced. I believe I told you once that everyone deserves a chance to do the right thing. You did, he acknowledged, though at the time I warned you that you'd regret helping me. And I said I'd live with it, Abigail reminded him, a smile tugging at her lips. So far I have no regrets. Nathan's expression grew serious. I can't promise it will always be easy. I've got a past that won't just disappear and 3 years of probation ahead of me. I'm not asking for easy, Abigail replied, just honest. He reached for her hand then, his touch sending warmth cascading through her. That I can promise. In the days that followed, Nathan began his community service repairing the school roof, helping build a new fence around the church cemetery, assisting the elderly with tasks they could no longer manage alone. The townsfolk watched him warily at first, but his diligent work and quiet demeanor gradually won acceptance, if not yet trust. Thomas O'Malley offered him a job at the mercantile partly, Abigail suspected, to keep an eye on the man who was clearly courting his daughter. He works hard, Thomas admitted grudgingly one evening as they closed the store. I'll give him that. And he's honest, Abigail added. Mrs. Peterson tried to underpay him yesterday and he corrected her mistake. Thomas harumphed. Don't think I don't see what's happening between you two. And what might that be, Pa? Abigail asked innocently. Don't play coy with me, girl. I've seen how you look at each other. He sighed heavily. Your mother would say I'm being an old bear about it, and she'd be right, Abigail replied, kissing his cheek, but I love you anyway. Summer turned to fall and fall to winter. Christmas brought snow to Copper Canyon, transforming the dusty streets into a wonderland of white. The O'Malleys invited Nathan to share their holiday meal, a gesture of acceptance that brought tears to his eyes, though he'd never admit it. As they sat before the fire that evening, Thomas dozed in his chair, leaving Abigail and Nathan in a rare moment of privacy. I received a letter from Caroline yesterday, Nathan said softly. She and Will are doing well in California. Their uncle's ranch is thriving. I'm glad, Abigail replied sincerely. Any lingering awkwardness regarding Caroline had faded months ago. Do you ever regret not going with them? Nathan shook his head, his eyes never leaving hers. Not for a moment. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small package wrapped in brown paper. I know it's not much, he said, holding it out to her, but I wanted you to have something for Christmas. Abigail unwrapped it carefully to reveal a delicately carved wooden box. Inside nestled a silver pendant, a simple design of intertwined leaves surrounding a small piece of turquoise. It's beautiful, she breathed. It reminded me of you, Nathan said. Strong but gentle, beautiful without trying to be. He took the necklace from the box and moved behind her chair. Abigail lifted her hair as he fastened it around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin in a touch that sent shivers down her spine. When he returned to his seat, his expression had grown serious. "Abigail, there's something I need to ask you." Her heart skipped a beat. "Yes." "I know I still have more than 2 years of probation. I know your father thinks I need to prove myself further, but I can't wait any longer to tell you." He reached for her hands. "I love you, Abigail O'Malley. I think I've loved you since that moment in the alley when you said you'd live with the regret of helping me." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too, Nathan. Then would you consider would you do me the honor of," he faltered, uncharacteristically nervous. "Yes," she said simply, his eyes widened. "You don't even know what I was going to ask." "Yes, I'll marry you," Abigail clarified, a smile breaking through her tears. "Though I expect a proper proposal when you've gathered your wits." Nathan laughed, pulling her into an embrace that woke Thomas with a startled snort. "What's all this?" he demanded, blinking sleepily. "Your daughter has agreed to marry me, sir," Nathan replied, not releasing his hold on Abigail, "though I should have asked your blessing first." Thomas looked between them, his expression softening despite his best efforts to maintain his gruff facade. "Well," he said finally, "I suppose there are worse things than having a reformed outlaw for a son-in-law. High praise indeed, Pa," Abigail laughed. They were married the following spring, when the desert bloomed with wildflowers and the promise of new beginnings hung in the air. The whole town turned out for the celebration, even Marshall Davis, who had gradually become one of Nathan's strongest advocates. Will and Caroline returned from California for the wedding, bringing gifts and news of their own engagement to neighbors from their uncle's ranch. As Abigail and Nathan shared their first dance as husband and wife, she couldn't help but reflect on the strange path that had brought them together: a wounded outlaw, a courageous decision, and words spoken in a moment of defiance. "You'll regret helping me. Then I'll live with it." "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, noticing her distant smile. "I'm thinking about regrets," she replied, "or rather the lack of them." He pulled her closer, his lips brushing her ear. "No regrets, not one," Abigail assured him. "Though I reserve the right to develop some in the future, especially if you continue to leave your boots in the middle of the floor." Nathan laughed, the sound warming her heart. "I'll work on that. See that you do, Mr. Jacobs." She rested her head against his shoulder. "We have a lifetime ahead of us, after all." And so they did. Nathan completed his probation with an exemplary record, eventually becoming Thomas O'Malley's partner in the mercantile. When Thomas retired 5 years later, they renamed the store Jacobs and O'Malley General Goods, honoring both families' legacies. Their first child, a daughter with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination, arrived a year after their wedding. 2 sons followed in the years after, filling their home with laughter and the occasional chaos that children invariably bring. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep, Nathan and Abigail would often sit on their porch, watching the desert stars wheel overhead. Sometimes they spoke of the past, the dangers they'd faced, the unlikely circumstances that had brought them together. More often, they discussed the future: their children's education, expansions to the store, community projects that needed attention. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Nathan presented Abigail with a journal bound in soft leather. "What's this?" she asked, running her fingers over the cover. "Our story," he replied. "I wrote it down, everything from the moment I stumbled into your alley to the day we were married. I thought our children might like to read it someday." Abigail raised an eyebrow. "All of it, even the parts where you were an outlaw and I harbored a fugitive." "Especially those parts," Nathan said with a grin. "How else will they understand that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the most unlikely words?" Abigail opened the journal, smiling at the first line Nathan had written. "The cowboy said, 'You'll regret helping me.'" She said, "Then I'll live with it." "And have you?" Nathan asked softly. "Lived with it?" Abigail looked up at the man who had come into her life bleeding and desperate, who had transformed himself through love and determination into a respected businessman, a devoted father, a beloved husband. "Every day," she replied, reaching for his hand. "And I wouldn't change a single moment."